Hello guys, I'm outside my office right now, and I know if the ones who are following tennis, they might have heard already that Jannik Sinner is already confirmed to be out from the Cincinnati Open. This was the rumor that was building up for the last, I would say, 3-4 days, and now it has become official. He has had some problems in his knee, in his right knee, and it does not look good to have 0 matches basically before the US Open is something to be worried about. And if you look at, obviously, Carlos Alcaraz is already confirmed to be out, and that means that the Cincinnati Open is totally open for everybody. Novak Djokovic has already secured, he has already confirmed that he's going to be there at Cincinnati Open, so there are chances that he can win his first big title since basically the Olympic gold medal 2 years ago, and his first Masters 1000 even since Paris 2023. So there are so many storylines, but the main talking point is Alcaraz and mainly Jannik Sinner. So if you look at it, the most important stat that I saw was that since the 1990s, nobody has won the US Open without playing either the Canadian Open or the Cincinnati Open. And that is astonishing, because I genuinely believe that if you have a long break before any Grand Slam, you can be fully recharged to win the US Open, particularly when we are talking about the US Open, because most of the players, when they end up being at the US Open, they are fatigued. They don't have the same kind of level to go there, to go up at that level for the US Open. That is basically the reason why we haven't had a US Open title defense since 2008. And to have no champions without playing basically, and either Canadian Open or Cincinnati Open, is an issue. And whether Sinner makes himself eligible for any late event before the US Open remains to be seen. But it's the knee. It depends whether that knee is fine to go with or not. Many people on social media were like, he had a very bad fall in his first round at Wimbledon against Kekmanovic, and that is the reason why it has soared up. No, that is totally wrong, because if you look at that video again, he fell on the pressure that came was on his left knee, okay, and he was totally fine after that. There was obviously there was blood in his foot, but that was his foot, it was not his knee, okay, and the pressure that came was on his left knee, it was not on his right knee. So I don't know why people are saying that was the main pivotal point. That has nothing to do with this knee injury, this knee issue. It is completely different, and it came up after his Wimbledon title win. Before I had made a video that he should not have skipped the Canadian Open, but maybe that injury had stopped him from competing at that point, because I genuinely believe that he could have played the Canadian Open and skipped Cincinnati instead. Because if you look at what happened last year in the final, when he basically gave up under the heat, not for the first time, obviously, he would try to escape that tournament and just play the Canadian Open. And after all, obviously, there is a huge sentiment when it comes to Canada for Sinner, because that was the first Masters 1000 event that he won in his career. So there are a lot of alarming bells surrounding Sinner and Alcaraz, obviously, because he has not played since April, and he's going to be there potentially at the US Open as the defending champion with next to no match rhythm. Whether that is a masterstroke or no, it depends, because he was practicing pretty much okay since the past few weeks, but to have such a stop before the US Open. It's kind of surprising. But the main talking point outside Sinner and Alcaraz is, what about the rest? I mean, now with Sinner skipping Cincinnati, and obviously if you look at the kind of points Sinner has to defend, not just at the US Open because he made the final last year, and then he has to defend at the China Open, then the Vienna Open, and then the Paris Masters, and then the ATP Finals. These 4 events he has to defend. And if you look at Alexander Zverev, who is world number 2, he has got basically nothing to defend for the rest of the season. Although he secured his spot at the ATP Finals last year, but he has got basically very few points to defend for the remainder of the season, and that means that he's going to be perfectly in contention for the world number 1 ranking now. And that's a huge surprise. I was just talking yesterday that we could have a new world number 1 in the women's rankings. Well, guess what? We could have a new world number 1 on the ATP Tour as well by the end of this year. Who knows? Obviously, Zverev needs to be a little more consistent. He was not at his best at the Canadian Open. He got knocked out. But I think he will be fine for the US Open, because obviously that Grand Slam question is now out of the way, and he played very well at Wimbledon as well. He made the final, and he would have some unfinished business at the US Open, where he almost ended up winning that title back in 2020. So he would have some kind of motivation now. With Sinner getting unfit, he would have the motivation to get the world number 1 ranking. So I feel that he would have something to play for there. But outside of Zverev, you've got Novak Djokovic. I've talked briefly about his Masters 1000 motivation at Cincinnati, but his main motivation is number 25. Can he get to number 25 with Sinner and Alcaraz out of the picture? Now, obviously, it is a huge question, because it is very, very likely that Sinner and Alcaraz are going to play at the US Open. But both of them could be undercooked. And if Djokovic manages to escape both of them, he is going to have a huge chance. Now, people are going to say, and yeah, they are right to an extent, because there was no Alcaraz at Roland Garros, and Sinner had lost in the second round, and he still was unable to not just win it, but he wasn't able to even go deep at Roland Garros. He lost in the third round to Joao Fonseca. And that was big, I genuinely believe, because I felt that Roland Garros was his biggest chance, and he could have done so much better, specifically with no Sinner and Alcaraz in front of him. So I genuinely feel that he could have done so much better there. But US Open presents himself with another opportunity. It is a tournament where he ended up winning his last Grand Slam in 2023. So what goes around comes around, maybe, for the Serb. Who knows? But what about the third guy? The new guy? Who is going to be the third guy outside Djokovic or Zverev? Fonseca, Jakub Mensik, and Rafael Jodar. Can either of those have the capability of winning their first Grand Slam? I'm going to say no, but I also said no when this question was brought up about Alcaraz back in 2022, and he ended up winning the US Open. And he ended up winning the US Open, he ended up finishing as the world number 1 that year. So stranger things have happened. You never know. Maybe Rafael Jodar this year, or Joao Fonseca this year, or Jakub Mensik this year. Who knows? With Sinner and Alcaraz out of the picture, there are so many people capable of winning this US Open. But again, the big question is, what happens to Sinner? Will he be fit? Will he be competitive at the US Open, or will he play a last minute? Will he take a last minute wild card at some small event and prepare himself for the US Open? Who knows? But we hope that he is fully fit and he competes well, and he goes for that sixth. He would be going for his 6th Grand Slam, and with the way he has played so far this year, I think he definitely deserves to win more. But to have these injury issues is some kind of a worry, specifically before the US Open, because I genuinely believe that he has a huge chance to close the gap on Alcaraz and win his second US Open title. Because I genuinely believe that right now, at this moment in time, if you look at it, Sinner is a better hardcourt player than Alcaraz. But both have 3 Grand Slams. Sinner has 2 Australian Opens, 1 US Open, and Alcaraz has 1 Australian Open and 2 US Opens. So in terms of Grand Slams, the hardcourt specialist has the same number of Grand Slam as not the hardcourt specialist. So that is something that Sinner would have to deal with. He would need another Grand Slam on the hard courts to make sure that he lets the world know that he is the hard court king right now. And to go the entire season without winning either of those 2 is going to be a huge blow for him. So let's see what happens. He would hope that he would be fit, and let's see where he ends up being for the US Open.